The invasion of Britain is happening at a record level. 1,168 Channel migrants broke into Britain in the last 4 days alone. 326 arrived yesterday. The total for this year so far is 3,244. That is higher than the same period last year and higher, in fact, than any year before that. Meanwhile, all we got from Labour and Tories at PMQs today was a total Ukrainian love-in.
President Zelensky is right to try and rebuild his relationship with President Trump.
We need to do everything we can to ensure that the US, Europe and Ukraine are working together on lasting peace.
That the United States has instructed Britain to suspend intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
That we work with the US, with Europe and Ukraine and make sure that if there is a deal, it has proper security guarantees.
Our country is being invaded, and that's all they care about, is it? Here are some other facts for you. Almost 1 million people in England now cannot speak English that well, if at all. The UK population is set to rise to 72.5 million by 2032, which is assumed to be entirely, it's not assumed actually, factually, it's fuelled entirely by mass immigration. What does that tell you? That English could become a foreign language in England. Don't believe me? Well, look at St Matthews and Highfields area of Leicester. As our very own Matt Goodwin tweeted, based on ONS data, 80% of people living in social housing there were born outside the UK. More people were born in the Middle East or Asia than in the UK. More than 40% of people live in households that contain no adults who speak English as their main language. What do we have in response to this from our political leaders? Well, here's a bit of the Prime Minister yesterday.
It is absolutely fantastic to be with you as people gather in homes, in mosques and communities around the country during this special season. Come together in charity and service and welcome people of all faiths and none for an iftar.
The Justice Minister today has faced criticism because sentencing guidelines now tell judges to consider the background of ethnic minority offenders before passing sentence. And, of course, that could well mean that they get a lesser sentence than somebody who happens to be white, Christian and a straight male. And what about the leader of Britain, really, the King? Well, we had the old Ramadan post, didn't we? Good stuff. And we've also had the obligatory post about Ukraine. There it is. Fantastic. Yeah, good stuff. What is going on here? Does nobody in a position of power seem to care about legal and illegal immigration changing Britain irreversibly forever? Let's get the views of my panel. Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, former Labour Party advisor, Stella Chantakidou. Yeah, it's slightly frustrating there because the actual fact of the matter is that, according to the ONS, our population growth is going to be entirely fuelled by immigration. So not quite sure why anyone needs to say the word allegedly in front of that. But anyway, what do you make of this? You know, we've got, it's quite a ridiculous situation, I think, haven't we, where we've got, record levels of people crossing the channel and, no one seems to be doing anything about it.
Yes, and I mean, it's all become performative about immigration. We're going to smash the gangs. I think that's a near impossibility. None of the mainstream political parties, I think, have yet really grasped the nettle of what you've got to do. It's pretty straightforward, but it's controversial. You need to leave the ECHR and repeal the Human Rights Act. You need to rapidly speed up the process by which people can be deported. You need to make it plain that if you've arrived here illegally, you can't stay here. And then for those who are here, you've mentioned the thing about 1 million people, what's that, 1 in 70 are very poor or can't speak English. I think we've got to move towards indigenous languages being the only ones used for official business. If you go to a doctor's surgery, it will be in English. I might make some concessions for Welsh or Gaelic or Cornish if the local indigenous communities want that. No politician seems willing to grasp all of this. All of that needs to be done to grapple this problem. And you know what, Patrick? It still wouldn't solve it overnight. We'd need the patience of 2 or 3 years of embedding that in before we got this under control. Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, again, PMQs today, as I showed you there, that's all about Ukraine. Oh, well done, everybody, for Zelensky. I'm not saying that Ukraine isn't an important issue. Of course it is. But that seems to be, it was 5 questions. You look at me like that, Stella. I mean, honestly, it's just a fact. First 5 questions from Kemi Badenoch were all agreeing with Keir Starmer about, just completely shaking each other's hands, saying, oh, it's fantastic, we're standing up for Ukraine. Great stuff. Meanwhile, we're being invaded. There are 1 million people who don't speak English or barely speak a word of it
in this country. And then the King seems obsessed with Ramadan. Keir Starmer seems obsessed with Ramadan. I mean, what's going on?
Look, it's not just illegal immigration, it's legal immigration as well. We've got a big problem here, but 1,300 have crossed the Channel in the last 5 days. Hardly any will be able to speak English. Most will be a net drain on the economy over the next 15, 20 years. We've got villages like Wethersfield in Essex where these migrants are placed. I had a mother contacted me yesterday. She was followed home from the play park in Wethersfield. These people have different cultures, different way of behaving and, their beliefs. Britain is changing rapidly and no one wants to put a stop to it.
It's just seems depressing. I mean, what do you make of the kind of maybe quite obsessive posts and virtue signalling that we've seen, for example, still about Ramadan, not a lot about Lent?
I don't think it's obsessive. If someone is Christian and they want to post about Lent, they're more than welcome to do that. I don't think it's obsessive at all. I think...
The King posts about Ramadan and not Lent.
Sorry, are you suggesting that the King never posts about Christian holidays?
Well, he didn't this time.
I mean, the King also can just do whatever they want. The King is the King. He's not, none of us represents the King. He's his own person. He can do whatever we want. But to go back to the problem with immigration. So, are you or are you not happy with what Yvette Cooper has been doing? Record levels of deportations on the Labour Party.
Majority of them to go, and only 3% of deportations have been Channel migrants. So no, I'm not happy.
So you're not happy?
We extended the deal with the French. So it was on a guarantee that they would continue to build a migrant detention centre in Dunkirk that was supposed to be contingent on the last round of money that we gave them. So, no, I'm not happy with the woman who once held a refugees welcome sign as our Home Secretary.
You keep on saying that. But at the moment, all I am seeing from Yvette Cooper in her actual position as a government minister is that she's taking some very hard decisions and she's acting really, really quickly. And people have been saying that.
The problem is getting worse. They're saying they've smashed the gangs, but the problem is getting worse.
Wait a minute, how is it getting worse? And you are saying
the record numbers have come across the Channel. That is a fact.
Are you suggesting that in the last 6 months that Labour has been in government, that they have not been doing more than the Conservatives have done in 15 years? This is a very, very big problem.
More and as you said last year under a Labour government than a Conservative
last year? What are you talking about? Labour wasn't in government for the majority of last year.
The numbers are not suggesting that the policy is meeting with great success, even if it's well-intentioned. And that's why I go back to my point. I don't think that the Labour Party is willing to pull the levers that are necessary to be pulled to get this under control.
I mean, you want to spend because what you want is you want another situation where Parliament basically spends the next 5 years talking about some constitutional change, some administrative.
I want to spend about 5 minutes on it. I think if you do not leave the ECHR and repeal the Human Rights Act, you will continue to get the judicial system making it incredibly hard to deport people. We see some extreme cases about you can't send me home because my kid likes chicken nuggets.
That was a fake case.
But we are making it incredibly difficult to deport people, an average of 18 months. This is ludicrous. And unless you're willing to grasp that nettle, I would like there to be a debate in Parliament.
I think they do. And I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm also frustrated with judicial activism. I think it's inappropriate. I do agree that, when someone it should not be up to judges to decide government policy.
Nobody's grasping that.
Just on a cultural level as well. So the fact that we appear to have now, by the way, I will say at least 1 million people in Britain who don't speak English or speak very little English. We're also going to see pockets of areas. I highlighted just one area there that was Leicester. There are numerous other parts of the UK where you can highlight. So it's a potent cocktail, actually. People who are not born in Britain, don't speak English and who are on benefits. And yet we don't seem to see anything like the same urgency from our politicians on that as we do about things like, shaking Zelensky's hand.
No, 100%. And look, we can I've spoke about Whitechapel before. You can walk from one end of Whitechapel to the other and you won't hear anyone speaking English. And there's many areas like that in Britain. We're spending 100 million a year on NHS interpreters. We're spending 8 million on benefit claimant interpreters, another 20 million for police interpreters. What is happening to this country? Our tax money is going on basically facilitating the life of foreigners in this country. And that's without talking about the crime stats from people born abroad or from migrants. things have to change, or this country is going to be unrecognisable in the next 5 or 10 years.
Do you think our political leaders get this stuff?
Yes, I do. I do think that they get that. And I also agree that if you are an immigrant in this country, you should be making every effort to learn English. I do think the government should help with that where it can happen. But if you are an economic migrant and you are moving here because you want to get a job, then it is your responsibility to learn English, preferably before you come here, and then there should be some kind of test. And I completely agree that it is not an acceptable situation that there are places where the vast majority of council housing is being taken by people who were not born here. I don't think this is an acceptable situation.
Yeah, I mean, on housing in particular, I think we've got to relook about whether we base it wholly on arithmetical need, which then tends to benefit large families who often tend to be immigrant families, or whether we need to go back to some sort of test about your local connection with the area, so that if you've actually had a family that have been in the area for many generations, you might be prioritised, even if you're a family of 3 as opposed to a family of 6. But we've thrown that out of the window.
It's too far gone. In some places in London, it's 70% of social housing is from foreign-born people.
And largely because
but also,
families.
isn't there a question?
How can we reverse this? It's impossible now. It's too late.
Do you not think when we had all of this up, Stella, can you understand why people might be a little bit frustrated when you see people who we see as big figures in this country, whether that's the Prime Minister, whether people voted for him or not, the Prime Minister's great office of state, we see that. We see the King, OK, and it does appear as though they are tripping over themselves to celebrate things like diversity and multiculturalism, when actually there are huge domestic problems being caused as a result of it.
I think this is such a cosmetic concern. What does it matter whether there are a lot of Muslims, there are a lot of British Muslims. It's fine to celebrate Ramadan. I don't care about that. What I want to know is why, for the last 15 years, a conservative right-wing government that was elected on a mandate to reduce immigration allowed the situation where you had people who would come here and then they would bring 10 other family members who did not speak English and who were not working.
I mean, we talk a lot, and we just have spoken about a lot of the rumours doing the rounds tonight for the last couple of days that Ed Miliband's probably on the way out, and I suspect that he is. I don't see how he can continue in post. But I just wonder if enough's getting spoken about Yvette Cooper, to be honest with you. From what I understand, people behind the scenes at the Home Office are not particularly happy with her. Channel crossings up, illegal migration, all right, they've made a big song and dance about deporting some people. We've had to pay most of them to leave, as far as I can tell. Crime is going through the roof as well. Surely her head must be on the chopping block, metaphorically, at some point soon.
So
That is possibly true. I mean, in Starmer's position, you can't lose too many of your chief lieutenants too quickly. Adam and I were talking in the break about whether Rachel Reeves might go. But if a Prime Minister loses their Chancellor, very often they're next for the chop. Home Secretary, possibly. And they've got to take a much bolder stance on immigration. I would agree with you, the Conservative record was poor. Intriguingly, Rishi Sunak has come out today saying we should leave the ECHR unless it's reformed. I wish he'd taken that position in office and put it in the Tory manifesto.
Yeah, but it's OK to say that. Words are fine.
Yeah, he should have done it in power.
It's actions that
infuriating.
we need to see.
I mean, I'm glad he's now seen the light, but he's no longer in a position to do anything.
This is why I believe we are going to see a Reform UK as our next government, because this is only getting worse over the next 3 or 4 years. At some point, even your moderate Brits that do not think immigration is that much of a problem, it's going to start affecting them. It's starting to move out to the villages, in the suburbs, and it's affecting everyone there.
One policy change that the Labour Party is looking at, which I'm very hopeful we will manage to achieve, is that they're trying to convince the OBR to stop considering low-skilled immigration to be something that is a boost for the economy, because it really isn't. So this is the work that is being done right now. They're trying to make the case that, look, actually, as a matter of fact, you should not be looking at lower skilled immigration coming here as a boost to the economy, and it's best. It is true that there will be some difficulty at first until the economy
But we should have simple rules on legal immigration. If you want to come here as a legal migrant, fine, but you've got to be a net contributor, not a beneficiary.